Welcome, and thank you for visiting the amazing Petrified Forest National Park and Painted Desert. And thank you for purchasing this audio tour to help guide you around. A large portion of the proceeds from your purchase will go toward our Junior Ranger program and other educational opportunities and research at the park. Today's fascinating tour will send you on a journey through one of the world's largest and most colorful concentrations of petrified wood, multi-hued badlands of the Painted Desert, historic structures, archaeological sites, and displays of fossils over 200 million years old. We'll see ancient rock art at Newspaper Rock, dating back many centuries. We'll walk around an original ancestral Puebloan village, and we'll learn about the times before, during, and after the dinosaurs roamed this land. We'll also tell you some very interesting stories about our historic past, and much more. My name is Blake, and I'll be your guide as we visit these spectacular places in this wonderful countryside you'll come to know and then love, the Petrified Forest and Painted Desert. The Painted Desert. In this north end of the park lies the expansive Painted Desert, which extends approximately 250 miles to the west, about 150 miles to the north and east, to roughly the Arizona-New Mexico border. For thousands of centuries, this land has been under constant change and has looked much different than it does today. All across this countryside, you'll be looking at colorful horizontal rock layers called the Chinle Formation. The Chinle is primarily made up of colorful varieties of sedimentary rock, mainly consisting of river-related deposits of soft, fine-grained mudstone, siltstone, and claystone. This formation was deposited during the late Triassic period, about 200 to 225 million years ago. And because of erosion, it's now widely exposed in many parts of the southwestern United States. The striking variation in pastel colors is what distinguishes the Chinle and makes it easily recognizable. Inside the park, you'll see it here in the Painted Desert, at Blue Mesa, and also at the teepees. When exposed to wind and water, the Chinle Formation erodes quickly, and as you'll see, this area has undergone massive erosion. This incredible erosion has exposed a treasure trove of plant and animal fossils, and has sculpted and shaped intriguing ravines, gullies, haystacks, hoodoos, flat-topped mesas, buttes, and other odd-looking landforms which are collectively referred to as badlands. These badlands have spectacular colors on display that alternate from light tans to dark black, blue coal to bright reds. The colors are most brilliant early or late in the day or after a late summer rainburst, but they're always a treat to see at any time of day. The colorful bands of the Chinle Formation represent chronological deposits of various soils. The white layer seen to the north from Teponi and Chinde points is a layer of tuff, the black forest tuff, that was once volcanic ashfall. In other parts of the park, the white layers tend to be sandstone, while the red and green layers remain generally iron and manganese. Differences in color depend on the water levels of the lakes and swamps when the ancient soils were formed. Where there was a lack of oxygen due to being submerged underwater, the soils are a greenish, purple, or blue hue. The reddish soils were formed where the water table fluctuated, allowing iron minerals to oxidize or rust. You'll also notice some grayish bands of coloring. These are usually formed from decayed plant and animal matter. By the way, the area north of Kachina Point is also referred to as the Black Forest, and that's because most of the petrified logs found here tend to be black, brown, or tan in color. As you drive along the rim here, you'll see several beautiful pull-off points where you can stop, walk around, and observe the Painted Desert. All of these points in the Painted Desert have gorgeous views, so enjoy them while you're here. Kachina Point.
Hi, this is Marge Post, Park Ranger. Kachina Point is a great place to stop and see the Painted Desert Inn. The original building, nicknamed the Stone Tree House, was a private enterprise built prior to 1924. The National Park Service bought the property in 1936 and remodeled it as part of the work relief programs of President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. Under the direction of Lorimer Skidmore, between 1937 and 1940, this building was transformed into the southwestern adobe-style structure you see today. This building is notable for its masterful combination of architecture and design, resulting from the fine skills of architects Lyle E. Bennett of the National Park Service and Mary Jane Coulter of the Fred Harvey Company. In 1947, Fred Cabote, the father of modern Hopi art, painted murals in the interior walls of the inn that depict a trek across the Painted Desert. The heyday for the Painted Desert Inn was 1948 to 1963, when its food and trading post operation was managed by the Fred Harvey Company, who we talk more about when discussing the railroads. Please stop in here and take a look around.
Chinde Point. Chinde is a Navajo term that means evil spirit or ghost. Some of the most beautiful lavender and red tones are to be seen here below the rim. This is also the place where Gertie, the famous dinosaur about the size of a Komodo dragon, was found and excavated in 1985. Gertie was a small meat-eating creature of about 150 pounds and 7 to 8 feet long that roamed here on the edges of freshwater lakes and rivers about 200 million years ago. Pintado Point. One of the most famous views in all the park is from Pintado Point. In Spanish, pintado means painted. Many believe the name was given because of the brilliant colors found here, especially at twilight. This location used to be called 350-degree Point because from here you get a view of almost the entire northern part of the park. You can see the highest point in the park, Pilot Rock, at 6,235 feet, and on most days you can spot the San Francisco peaks that rise over 12,000 feet to the west over by Flagstaff, about 120 miles away. Whipple Point. Once the United States won control over northern Arizona after the Mexican War in 1848, Army surveyors began exploring routes to link the eastern United States with California. Whipple Point is named after an Army lieutenant, Emil Whipple, who in 1853 was commissioned to explore the West and chart a possible route along the 35th parallel for the first intercontinental railroad. He was the first explorer to officially document this magical area and named the large dry wash in front of you Lithodendron Creek. Lacey Point. Lacey Point was named after John F. Lacey, a congressman and conservationist from around the turn of the century who lobbied Congress for the preservation of American archaeological sites and helped establish and protect Petrified Forest. Fossilization, trees to stone.
Hi, this is Marge Post, Park Ranger, and I'm going to help explain a little bit about fossils and the petrification process in the park. Arizona has one of the largest and most colorful petrified wood deposits on Earth. Many places around the world have some petrified wood, but not in the quantities and colors of this area. There is so much petrified wood here, the little town of Holbrook, 25 miles to the west, is sometimes called the petrified wood capital of the world. Also, petrified wood is a state fossil of Arizona. There are 4 main areas where you can see petrified wood in the park: Blue Mesa, Jasper Forest, Crystal Forest, and Rainbow Forest. You'll see blackish wood if you hike into the Painted Desert, but the best concentrations for up-close viewing are in these 4 primary areas. Of the 200 species of fossil plants identified here, only 14 are based on petrified wood, and they're all extinct now. The petrified wood we find here is primarily from large cone-bearing conifers, but surprisingly, scientists have also found the trunk of a fern tree, much like you might find in Southeast Asia today. In fact, other plants found here are closely related to those naturally inhabiting tropical parts of Australia, South Africa, and South America. We have also found stems of horsetails that were 14 to 16 inches in diameter and probably grew to 20 or even 30 feet tall. Solid evidence that this land was once in a very tropical climate. Over time, the logs that were buried by many sediments and before they could decompose had their cell structure replaced by silica from the volcanic ash and other minerals. In time, the logs were completely replaced by these minerals and eventually crystallized and hardened into agate. In other words, petrified.
Puerco Pueblo. As we approach Puerco Pueblo, off in the distance to the east, you're going to see some cottonwood trees. And wherever you see cottonwood trees, this means water. And where you see water, this means life. Throughout much of the 13th century, a series of droughts throughout the Southwest brought about disruptive social changes to those who lived in this area. We think some of the early people emigrated during this time, but some of them consolidated their scattered villages into a larger village here at Puerco Pueblo on this rise above the river. As the environment changed, the inhabitants of this region responded by developing new farming methods, new styles of construction, and new customs. The people of this village were good farmers who efficiently utilized river water, floodplains, and terraces for growing corn, beans, and squash. But over time, the climate change was just too much to cope with, so the village was abandoned sometime during the late 1300s. They most likely moved to the Hopi Pueblos about 100 miles northwest of here, or to the Zuni Pueblos about 100 miles to the east, and they never returned. There were about 100 rooms in this particular pueblo, and at its height around the turn of the 14th century, there may have been as many as 200 people living here. The one-story high village of sandstone blocks contained rooms that were used for storage and as living quarters that were built around a rectangular plaza in the center. There were few doors or windows in the exterior walls of the pueblo, so many entered the village by ladders over the exterior wall and across log, brush, and mud roofs. These people had created a virtual fortress. At night, stones would be rolled in front of entryways, and the ladders they used to climb in and out of their little village were simply lifted from the outside of the walls and left on the roof so they'd be protected from intrusion. The plazas were an area used for daily living activities. Within the plaza, you'll see a square-shaped kiva with rounded interior corners. Kivas are the subterranean worshiping areas where the inhabitants may have held ceremonies, much as the Hopis do today. In addition, we believe we have identified 3 subterranean rectangular kivas here. The shape of the kivas indicates a crossover influence of the Mogollon and northern peoples. The groups of people living in Puerco Pueblo are known as ancestral Puebloans. Some refer to them as Anasazi, but this term has the derogatory meaning of ancient enemy. It's offensive to modern-day Puebloans who pride themselves on being peaceful people. So ancestral Puebloans is a much more appropriate and respectful term. The ancestral Puebloans made and traded the beautiful and highly sought-after colored pottery with intricate designs. They were the great builders of pueblos and cliff dwellings, and specialized in very strong structures made of stone and adobe. There are many petroglyphs to be found on the south side along the ridge of this pueblo. You'll see many interesting designs and animal shapes that reveal something about the life that went on in this area while they were here. They may have used petroglyphs to track the seasons, to help them in timing their hunts, planting of crops, or just celebrating. One of the more intriguing petroglyphs is at the farthest point south on the easy foot trail that winds around the village. Look for footprints on one of the large boulders, and just to the left of it is a pecked-out design that resembles a copyright symbol, or the letter C, for about 2 weeks around June 21st. As the sun rises on the eastern horizon, a beam of light passes through a crack in some boulders to its left and strikes the center of the symbol. We aren't sure of the significance of this relationship, if any, but some believe it may have helped identify the passing of the season. Not exactly Groundhog Day, but maybe something like it. Puerco Pueblo is an example of the very fine villages that were built in this region during the 13th century. The inhabitants of this great pueblo were possibly a part of the migration to the Hopi Mesas and to the pueblos farther to the east, and maybe as far east as the Rio Grande Valley in New Mexico. So today's Puebloans are likely to be the descendants of the people from this early Pueblo culture. Many visitors ask why these people left and never returned to this peaceful village along the river. Some scientists believe climate throughout the Southwest began to change again in the late 1300s. Rainfall increased during the winter months instead of the spring and summer, and when summer rain did come, it was in short, very violent thunderstorms that destroyed their cropland. Wherever they went, it's unlikely they ever returned, because different changes began to occur in the mid-1500s. The invasion of new, more technologically advanced men. The first to come were the Spanish explorers in search of gold. Later, missionaries from Spain and Mexico followed them, and succeeding them were Euro-Americans who eventually dominated the area, permanently displacing them. Now only the sandstone bricks, potsherds, stone tools, petroglyphs, and other artifacts remain to tell the tale of these ancient people. Teepees. One of the most strikingly memorable areas within the park is the teepees, and you can easily guess where the name came from because of the resemblance to the triangular teepee dwellings of the Plains Indians who lived to the east of here on the Great Plains. There are a couple of pull-offs here, and if you'd like, you can stop and take a walk around. Newspaper rock. There are over 650 rock art designs here, and this is one of the largest concentrations of petroglyphs in Petrified Forest National Park. The natural dark coating you'll see on these boulders is called desert or rock varnish, and it presented a place for expression of thoughts and a way to communicate with others. Ancient artists produced many types of figures and patterns by carefully pecking the coated rock surfaces with sandstone hammers and sharpened tools made from agate or quartz materials like petrified wood or chert. They would hammer and peck the varnish to expose the lighter rock surface beneath, leaving behind their messages and symbols. These symbols in stone are called petroglyphs. See how many different symbols you can find when you go out there. The petroglyphs here at Newspaper Rock seem to depict the hunting of pronghorn and deer and the movement of various groups of people, but symbols can be very intriguing and their meaning can change over time. They represent the past and sometimes the future. They give life and some understanding to the study of those simple yet complex people who communicated their beliefs, dreams, and realities in symbols. Yet at the same time, they're difficult, if not impossible, to decipher, and we can't possibly make any definitive claims to their meaning. Some symbols were possibly directional signs, placed to mark a trail, identify territory, show the way to water or important places. Other symbols may have identified tribes or clans, or perhaps were used to record history, such as a memorable hunt or extraordinary deed. Some think certain symbols identify astrological bodies and mark the position and movement of the sun, moon, and stars. They may also define something intangible, such as an idea, belief, or religious thought. The exact meaning of ancient symbols of indigenous people is not possible to know in most instances. Blue Mesa. Blue Mesa is a wonderfully significant place to visit and is arguably the park's most dramatic and visually stunning example of badland formations. Here you'll see the blue, gray, white, lavender, and green striated mounds, cones, buttes, and fins that rise sharply above an otherwise flat and barren landscape. These color bands are the combined result of mineral presence and water levels during the great material deposits of the Chinle Formation. These formations are embedded with petrified trees, once carried by the great rivers, and trapped in the muck under tons of sediment. As we begin our ascent, know that Blue Mesa, because of its radical coloring, was once called the Blue Forest by the great Western naturalist John Muir. I've even heard some call it the Purple Forest, because much of the agatized wood here is lavender or purple color. If you take the walk, you'll see many logs being unearthed by the erosion of the shale and conglomerates. Some are perched rather precariously and look like they'll fall at any minute. Others have cracked and broken into many chips, and you must realize that this is nature in the process of tearing everything down. The moisture of rain and snow collects in cracks, and during the winter, when it freezes, the expansion that takes place breaks the petrified wood into sections, then into chips, and eventually it turns to sand. This is nature at work, tearing everything down over a very long period of time. Fossilization, trees to stone.
Arizona has one of the largest and most colorful petrified wood deposits on Earth. Many places around the world have some petrified wood, but not in the quantities and colors of this area. This region was near the southwestern edge of the Earth's largest existing landmass, Pangaea. The tropical location resulted in a climate and environment very different from today. About this time, the supercontinent began to break apart into the modern continents, which eventually shifted to their present locations. Fossil evidence of this ancient land lies in the sediments called the Chinle Formation, which is now so widely exposed in the region. Imagine a large basin with numerous rivers and streams flowing through the lowland. A lush landscape surrounds you with coniferous trees up to 9 feet in diameter and towering almost 200 feet into the sky. Galleries of trees, ferns, and giant horsetails waving in a warm breeze along the waterway, providing food and shelter for many insects, reptiles, amphibians, and other creatures. Wow. Of the 200 species of fossil plants identified here, only 14 are based on petrified wood, and they're all extinct now. The petrified wood we find here is primarily from large cone-bearing conifers, but surprisingly, scientists have also found the trunk of a fern tree, much like you might find in Southeast Asia today. In fact, other plants found here are closely related to those naturally inhabiting tropical parts of Australia, South Africa, and South America. Over time, trees fell into the waterways, knocked down by wind, undercut by water, or killed by insects. Rivers and streams carried the trees downstream, breaking off branches and roots along the way. Many tree trunks came to rest on the banks of the rivers, while others were buried in the stream channels. Most of the trees decomposed and disappeared, but some of the trees were petrified, becoming the beautiful fossilized logs we see today. So how did these trees turn to stone? You see, distant volcanoes spewed tons of ash into the atmosphere, and when it fell to the earth, The ash mixed into the river with muds, sand, and gravel. Over time, the logs that were buried by many sediments and before they could decompose had their cell structure replaced by silica from the volcanic ash and other minerals. In time, the logs were completely replaced by these minerals and eventually crystallized and hardened into agate, in other words, petrified. The trees got their vibrant colors from the various minerals that replaced the living cell structures. The manganese and carbon gave us the black and purple wood. Iron oxides produced the red, orange, and pink tones. If there wasn't much in the way of minerals other than silica, the wood was basically brown or with little or no color. When all the minerals got together, it became something John Muir, the grand old naturalist, described as a kaleidoscope fashioned by God's hand. So as you inspect some of these trees today, see if you can identify which minerals might have given them their beautiful colors. You'll also notice that most of the logs are broken into segments, as if someone sawed them into pieces, but that's not what happened. Composed of quartz, petrified logs are hard and brittle, breaking easily when subjected to stress. Softer sedimentary layers surround the hard logs, and as the sedimentary layers shifted and settled, stress on the rigid logs caused fractures. Some researchers believe such stress may have been produced by earthquakes or the gradual uplifting of the Colorado Plateau, but we know for sure it wasn't an old lumberjack. Our knowledge of the ancient life of the petrified forest is a product of many scientists who have spent years digging up and studying fossils in the laboratories. Their conclusions are based not only on fossils found here, but also on comparisons with fossils found elsewhere in the world and with living plants and animals. Fossils found here indicate a surprising variety of plants and animals that lived here during the late Triassic, when the Chinle Formation was being deposited. These fossils represent many elements of a 220 million-year-old ecosystem that includes not only petrified wood, but also many plants, freshwater clams, snails, crabs, fish, including sharks, amphibians, reptiles, dinosaurs, and many, many insects. Much more is to be learned about the fascinating history of petrified wood and fossils in the park, and I highly recommend you stop at the museums at each end of the park for a closer inspection and study of displays and books. Park Ranger, and I'll be talking to you about the wonderful plants and animals in the park. Although Petrified Forest is best known for its ancient environment, it is also a living park. Despite its seemingly barren appearance, Petrified Forest National Park supports hundreds of plant and animal species. The main environment of the park is classified as semi-desert shrub and grassland. Many visitors simply hurry through the grassland without giving it much thought, but it's worth some consideration and is an important resource for the park you're traveling through. The dominant plants are grasses. We have nearly 100 species and many are native to the region. Although the minuscule blossoms of grasses usually go unnoticed, other types of wildflowers are abundant throughout these wide open spaces. During spring and mid to late summer, you might see luminous evening primrose, golden Mariposa lily, and intensely blue flax. Native perennial bunch grasses and larger shrubs form clumps within the open ranges of grass, including several species of soft turquoise sagebrush and saltbush, which is festooned with papery seed pods.
In 1912, the railroad erected a stabilizing support under a large petrified log that straddled a deep gully and had managed to survive unbroken for thousands of years. It was wedged between the hard rock on either side of the gully. The force from both sides was holding the fractured sections of the log together, creating a natural bridge of precarious integrity. Thanks to the support system, the log still bridges the gully today, and it's about 50 paces from the parking lot. It's worth a look. Throughout the park, you'll see many forms of erosion. Here in the flat tops, you see a good example of where erosion has been slow. This is because there's a harder erosion-resistant sandstone layer or capstone on the top, which has left everything below intact. By the way, the flat-topped formations you see are known as mesas, which in Spanish means table. The Spanish first explored this area in the 1540s, but the Petrified Forest was discovered thousands of years ago by ancestors of today's Native Americans. We have found more than 850 prehistoric sites within the park, ranging in size from one-room shelters to the 100-room Puerco Pueblo village. Archaeologists at the park have found evidence of not only these early dwellings, but also traces of the first early hunters from over 10,000 years ago, the Paleo Indians. This nomadic dweller of 100 centuries ago or so foraged from place to place, following the game herds and gathering up seeds, roots, nuts, berries, anything they could eat. The necessity for constant movement kept material possessions to a minimum. The Paleo people left few artifacts and no permanent dwellings, but the scientists have found stone implements, campsites, and stone scatterings in the region. Welcome to Jasper Forest. Jasper refers to this area of the park where there's a large deposit of red petrified wood. The red coloring in the wood comes from the iron or hematite content. If a mesa is a flat-top mountain that's wider than it is high, and a butte is a formation that is taller than it is wide, what then is a bluff? A bluff is what you see here at Jasper Forest. A cliff face that has been revealed by erosion, a headland or a hill with a broad, steep face that has crumbled down. Bluffs are found around the edges of all mesas and buttes. Well, what you're looking for here are the petrified logs that were buried under river sediment for millions of years, but are now exposed in the hillside and down below due to the erosion of this rocky bluffs. Before the bridge at Puerco River was built, the only way into the area was on a dirt road from the Adamana Hotel and train station not too far from here. They promoted tourism into the Petrified Forest, which was then called Chalcedony Park, and many visitors would lug out whatever they could carry. Thankfully, this is illegal now. Long Logs and Agate House. There are two nice hiking options near here, Long Logs and Agate House. At Long Logs, you follow a half-mile trail that walks you through one of the park's largest concentrations of petrified wood. And it has some of the longest logs in the park, as you might have guessed. The Agate House was built by ancestral Puebloan people sometime between 1050 and 1200. We know petrified wood was used as a resource for spear and arrowheads, scrapers and knives, but it was also used as a building material for houses. The 8-room Agate House was constructed with chunks of petrified jewels bonded with a clay mortar. Its largest room was completely reconstructed in 1934, but the remains of this structure are worth a look and provide insight into the lives of ancient people, the unique environmental challenges they faced, and the adaptive use of available resources. If you take the approximately 3-mile round-trip hike, you might want to bring some water, a hat, and sunscreen. It can get pretty hot out there. Giant Logs Rainbow Forest Museum. Rainbow Forest Museum is definitely worth a stop to view very interesting displays depicting life during the Triassic period, when giant reptiles roamed this land. On display are fossils, bones, skeletons, assembled archosaurs, and petrified wood. Also, there's a fabulous short walk through the giant logs of Rainbow Forest, where hundreds of multicolored logs lay randomly for your up-close inspection. You'll see Old Faithful, one of the most massive logs in the park. There's also a movie to see and friendly, well-informed rangers on staff to answer questions. So whether you're just entering the park or almost finished with your tour, be sure to stop at the Rainbow Forest Museum.